In the dim light of Kyoto's wooden workshops, a craftsman bends over a bowl of shimmering black liquid. The air is thick with the sharp scent of tree sap, urushi, the toxic resin of the lacquer tree. Layer by layer, his brush breathes life into wood, turning fragility into eternity. In medieval Japan, this glossy substance was worth its weight in silver, a treasure born from poison, patience, and the quiet pursuit of perfection. Lacquer, known in Japan as urushi, came from the sap of the Rus verniciflua tree, a species that thrived only in East Asia, Japan, China, and Korea. It was a rare and temperamental gift of nature. Each tree yielded only a few grams of sap per year, drawn drop by drop through shallow cuts made by skilled hands. The sap itself was dangerously toxic. Even a single touch could blister skin or cause fever. Yet this poison, once refined, transformed into one of the most durable and luminous materials of the medieval world. When exposed to humidity, the resin hardened into a flawless surface that resisted water, decay, and time itself. Its depth of shine, a dark, mirror-like glow, was unlike anything produced in Europe during the same era. In early Japan, urushi was not merely a coating, but a form of alchemy. It turned ordinary wood into something sacred and indestructible. Farmers, monks, and samurai alike viewed lacquer as both a protection and a spiritual seal, preserving what it covered. This belief gave birth to an entire philosophy, that beauty could emerge from danger and permanence could rise from something fleeting. Through lacquer, the Japanese discovered not just a material, but a metaphor for life, fragile, painful, and enduring. The making of lacquerware demanded patience bordering on devotion. Once the raw sap was collected, it was filtered, stirred, and aged until it reached the perfect viscosity. Craftsmen applied it in impossibly thin layers with brushes made from animal hair, sometimes as fine as a single strand. Each layer required days to cure in a room of precisely controlled humidity and temperature. Too dry and it cracked, too damp and it clouded. The craftsman had to sense the air itself, its warmth, its weight, its stillness, as though he were collaborating with nature. To achieve the deep, glass-like finish prized by nobles, a small object such as a tea caddy could demand 30 or even 40 layers. The process might last months, sometimes years. Dust, breath, or a single hair could ruin everything, forcing the artisan to start again from the beginning. Because the work was dangerous and exhausting, few dared to master it. Those who did were treated with reverence, like priests of an unspoken faith, and their creations, small boxes, bowls, or ceremonial utensils, gleamed with the quiet power of devotion itself, each one a mirror of time, patience, and human endurance. In medieval Japan, lacquerware became a silent marker of status and refinement. Within noble households, every object that touched the hand of an aristocrat, from tea utensils to writing boxes, gleamed with the dark sheen of urushi. Its presence in the tea ceremony or chanoyu reflected not only aesthetic taste, but spiritual discipline. To pour tea from a lacquered bowl was to engage in a ritual of stillness, a meditation on impermanence and purity. Lacquer extended beyond the tea room. Samurai armor, often crafted from layers of iron and leather, was coated with urushi to resist humidity and rot. The result was both functional and symbolic, armor that shone like a mirror, reflecting light in battle while protecting the warrior from the damp Japanese climate. Even weapons, the scabbards of swords, the handles of bows, were sealed in lacquer, their glossy surfaces testifying to the unity of art and warfare. Wedding chests, offering boxes, and ritual stands were painted in vivid black, red, or gold, their motifs of cranes, waves, or cherry blossoms whispering messages of longevity and purity. Each piece stood as a bridge between faith and beauty, a reminder that lacquer, though born from poison, represented harmony between man and nature, discipline and desire. In Buddhist temples, lacquer was revered as more than craftsmanship. It was a medium of sanctity. Sculptors used it to preserve wooden statues of the Buddha, sealing their forms against decay and giving them an otherworldly radiance. To coat a sacred figure in urushi was to grant it a form of immortality. The deep black of lacquer carried spiritual weight. It symbolized silence, emptiness, and the eternal, qualities central to both Buddhism and the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi. Within this philosophy, beauty was not found in perfection but in impermanence, restraint, and depth. Lacquer embodied all three. Temple altars, ritual trays, and votive offerings gleamed softly in the candlelight, their polished surfaces reflecting the flames like ripples in still water. In this light, lacquer became a bridge between the material and the divine, a surface through which time and soul intertwined. The act of applying lacquer itself was almost meditative. Each brushstroke carried intention, humility, and devotion. To the craftsmen and monks who worked in silence, urushi was not merely decoration but a form of prayer, an offering to the gods of endurance and transformation. By the 13th to 15th centuries, Japanese lacquerware had become one of the most sought-after commodities in Asia. Merchants shipped boxes, trays, and armour to China, Korea, and Southeast Asia, where nobles and temples regarded them as objects of wonder. A single tea caddy or jewellery box could command the price of several ounces of silver, not merely for its beauty, but for the unimaginable labour it embodied. The saying, "a drop of lacquer, a drop of blood," was no exaggeration. The process was physically punishing, and urushi itself was poisonous. Yet that danger was precisely what made the finished product so revered. Where silver tarnished and rusted, lacquer resisted time. It could outlast its owner, its glow deepening with each passing generation. While silver represented wealth, lacquer represented patience and mastery, the triumph of spirit over material. In the courts of Kyoto, foreign envoys presented lacquerware as diplomatic gifts, as precious as jade or silk. To hold such an object was to hold centuries of refinement in one's hands. In a world where most beauty faded, lacquer alone seemed eternal, a paradoxical treasure born from decay and poison, embodying the Japanese pursuit of permanence through impermanence. The art of lacquer was not taught openly. It passed from father to son, from master to apprentice, in whispers and rituals. The secrets of mixing pigments, curing humidity, and blending sap with clay or gold dust were guarded as family heirlooms. Villages like Wajima, Aizu, and Kyoto grew into sanctuaries of craftsmanship, each developing its distinct style, some favouring deep crimson tones, others the mirror-black finish known as kuro urushi. Every brushstroke carried a lineage, a trace of hands that had practised for generations. To apprentice in lacquerwork was a vow of humility. Young artisans spent years preparing brushes, grinding powders, or simply watching their masters in silence before ever touching a piece of wood. Mistakes were punished not with anger, but with repetition, again and again, until motion became meditation. The finest lacquerers were treated with the respect reserved for priests or scholars. Shoguns offered patronage, temples granted blessings. In their work, art and faith fused completely. Each bowl, armour plate, or box was not just a crafted object but a living signature, a fragment of human endurance that shimmered beneath layers of black and gold. For the samurai, lacquer was not simply a luxury. It was a shield between life and death. The humid climate of Japan could corrode metal and rot leather, but when armour was coated in urushi, it became nearly indestructible. Each suit of yoroi, the traditional samurai armour, thus was painstakingly layered with lacquer to repel moisture and preserve colour for decades. The result was both practical and symbolic. Under sunlight, a warrior's armour gleamed with a dark brilliance that resembled still water before a storm. It was beauty fused with menace. The lacquered surfaces of helmets, scabbards, and banners reflected not vanity but discipline, the belief that form and spirit must be as pure as the blade itself. Even in death, lacquer played its part. Fallen warriors were buried with lacquered masks or sword handles, meant to preserve their essence and protect their remains from decay. In this way, urushi extended the samurai's code, not just of honour, but of endurance beyond mortality. To polish a sword or armour was to polish the soul. Lacquer became the skin of the samurai ideal, flawless, resilient, and silent in its strength. While lacquer shimmered in temples and castles, it was almost invisible in the homes of commoners. Farmers and townsfolk used plain wood, unpainted and unprotected, their bowls and boxes cracking under the strain of daily life. To them, lacquerware was a dream, a symbol of a world that glittered far beyond their reach. This contrast revealed the rigid hierarchy of medieval Japan. The same substance that adorned the emperor's altar could never touch a peasant's table. The black gloss of urushi thus became a mirror of social order, reflecting both the refinement and cruelty of a society divided by class and privilege. Occasionally, a craftsman might make a small lacquered item for his family, a spoon, a comb, a keepsake box. But these were acts of love, not luxury, meant to preserve something fragile in a harsh world. The common people admired lacquer from afar, seeing in its glow not envy but aspiration, proof that human hands, even when bound by poverty, could still create eternity. In the divide between noble brilliance and humble survival, lacquer stood as both a boundary and a bridge, a silent reminder of beauty's price. To work with lacquer was to dance with danger. The sap of the urushi tree contained potent toxins that could inflame skin, cause fever, or even stop a man's breathing. Many artisans bore lifelong scars on their arms and faces, silent marks of devotion carved by their own craft. Workshops were kept warm and damp to aid the curing process, but this made the air thick and suffocating. The smell of resin clung to every surface. Dust and sunlight were enemies. Even a stray breeze could ruin a day's effort. The artisans lived in quiet isolation, often working by candlelight, covered from head to toe, their faces hidden beneath cloth to protect them from fumes. Yet they persevered. They saw their suffering not as punishment but as purification. Each burn, each rash, each sleepless night became part of the creation itself, a hidden layer beneath the polished surface. The beauty of lacquerware was thus inseparable from pain. To hold a lacquered bowl was to touch the labour of bodies that endured, the patience of souls that refused to yield. Urushi was more than a craft. It was an act of transcendence, turning poison into permanence, agony into art. From the venom of trees, humanity forged beauty that could outlast centuries. Lacquer embodied the Japanese spirit of transformation, the belief that even suffering could be refined into grace. Each object, no matter how small, was the result of time distilled into form, of endurance polished into radiance. In medieval Japan, lacquer was worth silver not for its rarity alone, but because it contained something no metal could hold, the human spirit. It was the sheen of perseverance, the silence of devotion, and the quiet defiance of decay. When we gaze upon a lacquered tea bowl today, we are not just admiring craftsmanship, we are looking into a mirror of history. The reflection we see is not of wealth or power, but of patience, humility, and transformation. Through lacquer, Japan taught the world a lesson whispered through centuries, that beauty is not born from ease, but from endurance, from the courage to touch what burns, and the faith that even poison can shine.